Joining us now, let me give it a 10-second gap between that very low-level joke and introducing our. It wasn't low-level though. I mean, that actually pretty much summarizes everything. Joining us now is our friend Joshua Kahn Russell. He's the executive director of Wildfire Project. It's one of the most interesting activism, training, and organizing models I've ever seen. You can go back into our archives if you're a patron. We've done some deep dives in ecological organizing, building a healthy culture on the left. If you're watching and you're not a patron, certainly get started with our many conversations on YouTube, including the one where Joshua in studio with us used the Simpsons to teach us a model of how to run a social change campaign. Joshua, welcome to isolation with us.
Yo, it's been fun to laugh with / at you guys tonight after such a stressful day.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm feeling actually pretty it's been, coasting the chaos. It's every second I feel something different, but it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you have everybody's running around giving each other opinions and stuff, but this is a lot. I'll say for me, I know that part of the reason as an example, look, I'll keep emphasizing everything I'm saying about Elizabeth Warren and the political calculations of this campaign are totally right. I'm correct. I've read this very well. And, people hate that at times, but it is what it is. We've read this very well. And part of the reason that I'm getting so fucking pissed off, I know, is because I have a person close to me going through an eviction process. And that's compounding and other people and man, if this situation was happening, 3 years ago, would I, my God. So there's so much going on. There's a pandemic. There's the solidifying of a horrifying and depressing general election of just zombie people and parties. There's the fact that people are all, even the luckiest among us, are getting stir crazy as hell. So Joshua, some people are going to be interested in tips, ideas, mental practices, mental avoidances. What should we be doing to feel some sense of connectedness and sanity right now?
Yeah, where do you want to start? Well, let me just tell you the 4 categories that I've split my life into, and then you pick which one to talk about. So, I'm supporting some elders in my life who I don't live near, who don't have access to groceries, are stuck in their houses and apartments, and don't have any money and are freaking out. And I'm trying to figure out, I spent a few hours today trying to figure out what are everything from Amazon to Meals on Wheels, whatever I can get to deliver groceries, none of it's available. And so worrying how to support the people in my life is one category. The other category is supporting some of these social movements that I work with to adjust and adapt their campaigns in this moment and figure out what that looks like. The others related to our organization, Wildfire Project, and then the others for my own personal health and sanity. Let's start there. Yeah,
let's start there and work out. Can you also explain to folks that you have wildlife in your home? So there's
I live in a jungle.
Very, very sound sensitive, and they should know what's going on.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I little known fact. I actually breed tree frogs. I'm not even kidding. And so I have crickets in these tree frog tanks, and that's probably, if people are hearing it, that's probably what they're hearing.
I've had the honor of visiting to hung out a little bit. It's quite something in there. Anyways, all right, Josh, start at the personal.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk. I think in dialectics. So let's talk in dialectics. And the one that you mentioned earlier when you were talking to Emma is about social media, right? Which is that social media offers us connection right now, and it also offers us disconnection. And what I mean by that is A lot of us are hungry for the news, hungry for updates. And, I know a lot of folks who are feeling, deeply panicky, isolated. One thing that happens in a crisis is that people's traumas emerge. And, my partner is a therapist and is saying that like all their clients right now are just like all of their underlying stuff is coming out. And I think that's happening to our whole society in a way. And so, if I know people who are like having dance parties on FaceTime and stuff like that, and that's beautiful, and like connecting with each other, there's real, I guess I just want to honor that like social media can offer us real connection. We're talking on the internet right now. Also though, as someone who's addicted to the news, I know that I can tap into a like crazy anxiety cycle where I'm just compulsively checking shit every 10 seconds. It's like, this is going to be a long haul crisis. And yes, the news, the moment that I found out that the Bay Area where I live went into shelter in place was a big moment. Like you might find something out in the moment that you check a thing. And though, I don't think our brains can sustain the compulsive feeding of anxiety cycles that can happen on social media. And unplugging is really important. And it's really important for me. And, there's this other weird moment where like some folks who are out of work have like plenty of time and are isolated and don't know what to do with themselves. And other folks are like mad busy, rushing around trying to take care of people, figure shit out. And we're all experiencing like a big range of that stuff depending on your social location. And within that, I've always believed that action is an antidote to despair. Yep. And so whether that's like interpersonally, like calling and checking up on someone or like making a care package for your neighbor, all of the kinds of mutual aid and social solidarity stuff that we're talking about on an interpersonal level is beautiful. And eventually it's going to need to pivot into political action, which we can talk more about when we talk about some of the campaign stuff. But I think that a lot of campaigns and activism, a lot of social movement work right now is being hindered by we can't have gatherings, we can't protest, we can't demonstrate. It's a lot harder to organize, we can't gather. And so folks are pivoting to digital campaigning and online organizing. And the plus side of that is that there'll be an opportunity, I think, for a lot of people who aren't a part of organizations to join digital campaigning. And I think there's some mass-based vehicles like Sunrise, where if you sign up on their listservs, you'll get a lot of opportunities to plug in. Hold on one second. I'm just going to tell my roommates to keep it down.
Yeah, you tell them that there's work being done.
Yeah.
How dare they?
But it's nice. I had in my build, I live in a larger building. I actually just moved in over the weekend, which was pretty wild. But they set up a listserv and like now a Facebook group with everybody in this building so that, people can keep in touch. And if people need help, getting groceries or something like that. I mean, this is definitely a really great opportunity too, to be able to reach out to neighbors and to build communities with people that you might not have done so in the past.
Yeah.
All of those things can be leveraged. Anyways, okay, go ahead, Joshua. Have you told your roommates to go isolate themselves further?
Yeah.
Good.
And I kind of lost.
So you're talking about the kind of, well, I want to maybe actually sharpen it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I want to actually ask you a big picture question that will get out of those four categories, but you can move, any one of those four categories or three categories that we haven't gotten to yet could be relevant, which is, what is the relationship? And we were talking about this earlier, and again, I'll always do this disclaimer because it's insane to me, the idea that anybody would take anything that we would say seriously in some respects in this regard, but I'll just keep reiterating, while they are telling us to stay indoors, stay the fuck indoors, please. Be safe. Look, go take a walk, get air. My understanding is that that's very healthy and important, but avoid all gatherings, don't socialize, et cetera, 100%. And it's extremely important that we do not allow this level of atomization to become a normal in
Mm-hmm.
terms of our work lives, our social lives, our business lives, and certainly from the perspective of going back out with regards to mass politics. So you were kind of talking about that tension, and I just wanted to frame it as like, you know, that old cliche, but a true cliche. You never let a crisis go to waste.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your thinking in that regard?
Yeah, well, you know, I think in kind of apocalyptic terms, and I say that I use that word in an empowered sense, and we've talked about that on the show before, where I know Matt loves etymology and where words come from, and I can't remember if we've talked about this on the show or not, but the root of the word apocalypse means lifting the veil. So I'm not apocalyptic in the sense of thinking that the world is ending. I'm apocalyptic in the sense of understanding, it's really about understanding hegemony, where there's a moment of, you know, the Greek of apocalypse is, if it's lifting the veil, it's a moment when the underlying power relations become revealed and the dominating stories don't make sense anymore. So within the Wildfire Project, one way that we talk about hegemony is we talk about it as the way that dominant power becomes common sense, right? That's one way of thinking about hegemony and narrative strategy. And we look at narrative strategy as, when are there moments when the dominant assumptions that we're all taught in this society don't make sense with our physical structural reality anymore. Our material conditions don't compute within the way that we're taught to see the world. And we're entering one of those moments now. And those are moments of extreme fluidity and extreme chaos. And the right is really good at capitalizing on them. You know, 9/11 was one of those moments that was capitalized on very well with the right. The entire discourse of disaster capitalism that Naomi Klein has built out, and understanding the capitalism is very good at being opportunistic and exploiting a crisis. And we're not nearly as good at seeing the openings where we can actually change the operating logic of the stories with which people use to interpret that around, you know, what's around us. Not because narrative strategy changes anything in and of itself, but because when we change the discourse, it creates the conditions in which we can organize on a material basis and build mass movements. So I'll just give an example that I have to, I'll be careful to keep some details out of it because it's sensitive, but there's a union here that's organizing Alameda Health System workers and has been building up towards an escalation. And these are a whole range of workers in the hospital systems here who are treated like shit, who are organizing around a broad range of demands for their basic dignity. And just as they were beginning to escalate, the virus hits, and not only, you know, in the exact moment that they are frontline workers who are incredibly vulnerable and need to be working these crazy shifts, it's also at the same time that all the rallies have to be canceled. And so now is one moment where we get to ask as strategists, well, we've lost a bunch of potential tactics that we can use. We've lost certain kinds of leverage that we have. Where do we have new leverage that we didn't have before? And I think in this particular moment, like literally this week, it's really reasonable for a lot of us to just be learning how to take care of ourselves and those around us. And I want to be clear that not everyone has the luxury of jumping into like strategy thinking in this moment, but we do need to pivot to that pretty soon. Yeah. And once we find a way to orient ourselves and take care of each other's immediate needs, which is itself going to be a long-term project where we can build, you know, counter-hegemonic forces of building solidarity economies. And you all mentioned some of that earlier at the end of Griscom's piece that I appreciated, reimagining our food distribution systems, everything like that. Not just reimagining it, but doing it.
We're actually doing it.
Yeah.
It's very important about starting to use corporate language in that sense.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like there is something to learn. We all understand how ridiculous like the Nike just do it ethos is. But at the same time, like the left needs some of that. Like, yeah, a lot of people have reimagined food systems. They're obscene on any number of levels. And a lot of brilliant people have reimagined how they can be localized, how they can be democratized, how they can be regionally diversified, how they can have like, you know, the best of both worlds in terms of like, you know, trading various food specialties across boundaries, but then having a huge amount of local resilience built up. And so you cut unnecessary travel and so on. And now we got to do it.
Yeah.
Now we need to seize power and create you know, we need to do these things. And obviously it's hard, I'm not saying that, but the mentality of, that's another dialectic I want to ask you about. It's very much on my mind. I feel like we need to spend so much time rethinking and reconceptualizing things because a lot of our maps aren't working and are discredited. And then and so it requires like, you know, very Zizekian. Like you got to sit down, you got to actually think, you got to read, we've got to talk, you know. And I see the resistance to that, and I get it because like things are on fire. But if you don't have the right map, you know, you're not going to put out. If you don't have water, then you're not going to put out the fire.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, I also see just even rhetorically us talking about like, okay, here's a path for seizing power. Here's a path for doing food systems differently. I think that might be a good cue for us. Yeah.
I have a few things to say about that. One, thinking about doing a thing isn't the same as doing a thing. and that, I mean, it sounds obvious and kind of silly to say out loud, but the left really, I think in my experience, doesn't get that. And I mean, a lot of us who love to think, actually our egos convince us that if we analyze a thing enough and figure it out, that'll change a thing. Right. It's actually a psychological archetype. It's not just, so there's a spiritual component of, just embodying a thing. And the way that I think you surf that dialectic is being comfortable with being messy. You know, that praxis is about learning through struggle. It's about wanting to constantly be a student of your context, not being afraid of study, not being afraid of being rigorous, not being afraid of analysis, but not letting that get in the way of actually moving concretely in the real world and being a student of your context. And that, you know, so one of my wildfire comrades, BJ Starr, and I were on a podcast yesterday where we were talking about the spiritual practice of surrender, which activists hate because we confuse surrender with submission. And we talk about there's a certain practice of accepting what is and sort of surrendering, like this virus is happening. Shit's going to get worse. People are going to suffer. I accept that. I surrender to that reality. And then I can regroup and then act where I actually have power. And that surrender allows us to release the hypervigilance of trying to stay in control of every little thing and act where we actually have power and assess where we have power. But that cliche that is in every spiritual tradition of like, you know, grant me the wisdom to change what I can change and to whatever, not let go of what I can't. The knowing the difference only comes through struggle. It only comes from actually doing the work. The difference of what I can change and can't change doesn't actually come from theory. It actually comes from being out there and practicing the work. And
this is another reason we all need to be much more like good to each other. And hold paradox and forgiveness and complexity, because if we're going to actually do it, there's going to be mistakes made. Human beings are going to be complicated. We can't be running on a cult because it's hard and it's real and it's human.
Yeah, exactly.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.